All right. We have officially started the meeting today, so good morning, everybody. Great to have you. For those of you that I've not met, my name is Caitlin Long. I'm the Boards and Commissions Coordinator for BHA. I help oversee this statutorily required council, as well as the Behavioral Health Administration Advisory Council, the Behavioral Health Planning and Administration, Planning and Advisory Council, this council, and then the Mental Health Advisory Board as well. So let's see here. So we'll go through and do a quick roll call. And then if anybody would like to go ahead and introduce themselves to the group, I think that would be great as well. So let's see here. Brett Bowman.
Hey everybody, my name is Brett. I am a caseworker and family meeting facilitator for Pitkin County Adult and Family Services.
Thank you, Brett. Let's see here. Chester DeAngelis. Do you have Chester on this morning? I don't believe so. Let's see. Lindsay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Edwards, Program Manager for the Children Youth Mental Health Treatment Act at the Behavioral Health Administration. Nice to meet you all if I haven't met you before, and hi, everyone.
All right, Lindsay. Let's see here. Ella Hawk. Ella today. I know Anastasia is going to be out, as well as Megan. Do we have Deborah on? Deborah Monahan? Sorry, the mailman's walking by.
Deborah usually joins a little bit late. Okay. If memory serves, she has a standing. I think it makes her a little bit late.
That makes sense. Let's see here. Michelle.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Michelle Perry. I'm an ARC advocate with Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert counties.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Peelsticker, Staff Attorney at Disability Law Colorado.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, Gina is going to be out today. Sarah, do we have Sarah Rush on? No. All right, Brett Snyder.
Good morning. I'm Brett Snyder. I am Director of Clinical Services at Signal, which is one of the ASOs that facilitates CYMHTA.
Thank you, Brett. And Ellen.
Good morning. Thanks, Caitlin. I'm Ellen Stern, the Director of Government Affairs for Children's Hospital Colorado. And I think this is my last meeting as we transition this hopefully to one of our clinicians at Children's. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. We will definitely miss you. All right, everybody. Let's see here. And wanted to go ahead and review the agenda today. Everybody should have received this a couple of weeks ago. It's also the link in your chat. Is there any additions, edits, comments that would like to be made at this time? Hands and head shake.
I'm sorry, Caitlin, what was the question?
For the agenda review today, if there's any additions or edits that need to be made for the agenda today.
So I had emailed to ask about the budget cut, and I'm wondering if you're planning to discuss that.
Yes, we will. So we are going to have Ryan Templeton join us at around 9 a.m. And he's going to talk a little bit about the budget cuts. I do know that even though on paper it looks like we're getting budget cuts, it's not going to be impacting services. And so he's going to be able to explain that in a little bit more detail to you all today.
Great, thanks.
Of course. All right. And let's see here. I don't believe that we have enough people in order to make a motion to approve the August meeting minutes. So the link is here for your review. So we will just plan for next meeting to review the August meeting minutes as well as the meeting minutes for this meeting today and approve those once we get more participants in that we can formally make that motion. All right. So moving down to BHA board business. So wanted to kind of take a minute to talk to you all about bylaws again. I know that I spent a good chunk of time during the last meeting talking about that and reviewing those with you all. For the new members that are joining us or members of the public, what we are doing right now is we have worked to standardize bylaws across all of our statutorily required councils. And then at that point, we decided to meet with each council individually and work through the bylaws to make edits to make them more unique to the needs of this specific council. So wanted to give you the comparison on what we've kind of done. We talked about this during last meeting, and I also held some bylaw office hours for those members that were able to join. And so if you look at the first draft of bylaws here, you'll be able to see different comments that had been made from different members that had filled out the bylaw feedback form, as well as participated in the bylaw office hours. And so you're more than welcome to go through those and look at all of that information to see how it has been incorporated into the bylaw draft 2. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the bylaw draft 2. Again, since we haven't reached a quorum today, I know that we're not going to be able to take a formal vote to enact these bylaws at this time. That's something that we'll hope to be able to do at the February meeting. But did want to go ahead and talk to you all about at least the mission and vision today to see if there's any other edits or comments that you would like to be made in the second draft of bylaws. Just so I can do, a third draft of bylaws if I need to in between this meeting and our February meeting. So I'll zoom in a little bit more. Is everybody able to see that pretty clearly? Thank you. All right. So based off of your feedback, we have written the mission statement as the Children and Youth Mental Health Services Standards Advisory Board advises and makes recommendations to the BHA Commissioner regarding the rules, regulations, and implementation of the Child and Youth Mental Health Treatment Act. Through cross-community collaboration, personal experiences, and professional expertise, this council aims to increase behavioral health access for children, youth, families, and caregivers that would otherwise lack mental health services and may risk out-of-home placement. So what do you all think about that mission statement? Is that pretty in line with what you all were thinking? Again, if you look at the bylaw draft 1, we're trying to incorporate a lot of the comments that you have made about what you all believe to be part of the mission statement. Michelle, are you talking? You're on mute.
Sorry.
You're right.
Today, a struggle with the snow and getting kids to school. Cherry Creek decided not to close, so rushing kids to school is a rush. So sorry.
Not a problem.
I think it sounds really good, and I think it does really align with our mission and what we do.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Any other feedback? Sarah, Brett?
As one Brett, I agree. I think that it captures what I would view the mission and vision of the board to be, and I like some of the phrasing and call outs to particular elements, such as like removing fiscal barriers for accessing care.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right. So we will keep that for now. And we can review with the council as a whole during February as well, just to go ahead and take that formal vote. For vision, so we have that the vision of the Children and Youth Mental Health Services Standards Advisory Board is to ensure mental health access for children, youth, and families throughout Colorado by reestablishing a behavioral health system that removes fiscal barriers. Seeing some head nods there. Is there any other language that you think would be better suited here, or is this pretty agreeable to how you all are envisioning this council? Thank you, Brett. All right. Thumbs up from Sarah. Sounds good. All right, everybody. So we at least have hopefully a very solid vision and mission statement moving forward. I'll just let you all review some of these comments and edits on your own time. Again, since we're not going to be able to take that formal vote today anyways. But again, as you can see here, everything that's highlighted, it's going to be, it's going to have some edits to it and things like that. I did want to kind of call out briefly this comment. So specifically about officers. So as we had talked about during the last meeting, we are going to be working to formally elect officers to this council. So we'll have an officer chair and an officer vice chair. And those are going to be serving as like the parliamentary authority of these councils, as you can see kind of laid out in this bylaw. So what Lindsay and I were kind of talking about is the establishment of officers and how long each term was going to be served. So I believe it's the first draft, we had it listed as each officer would serve 1 year. And then each year we would hold another re-election. We could keep the officers in place for up to 3 years, but wanted just to give the opportunity for frequent check-ins. Lindsay had made a comment about, maybe reestablishing this in a different way. And I was going to let her kind of speak about this today, to kind of explain what she was thinking and see what you all think about that as well. So Lindsay, I'm going to pass it over to you if that's okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So some of what my thinking is really this board. What I've seen is just an excellent element of this board is its historical knowledge. The folks who've been involved in this board have been involved for a while. And that historical knowledge about CYMHTA, I think, is really important for making decisions about the program. And just for those of you who don't know, I'm still relatively new in this position. I've been here for about a year. And so all of the information that the folks on this board has been critical in my understanding of the implementation of CYMHTA, and it's just really been informative for our decision making as an entity. So what my thinking is I was concerned that having a shorter tenure, or even having term limits or having too short of term limits for board members might actually operate to reduce the amount of historical knowledge that lives on this board. And on the other side of that, I also understand we want to have fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. So what I was hoping is that we could set up the tenure for board members and then the tenure for leadership to facilitate a balance between the retention of historical knowledge and also the integration of fresh ideas, new perspectives with new board members. So I've been on councils in the past that have had too short of terms for leadership positions. And what will happen is that the term limit for your seat on the board is short enough that it drives only new folks on a board to be eligible to be able to serve in a leadership position. So for instance, if we have a 3-year tenure on a board and we have or a 2-year tenure on a board and we have a 1-year tenure as leadership, then really there's not a whole lot of historical knowledge that the leadership can have, because there's not sufficient amount of time for you to be on the council before being able to step up for a leadership position and then still have enough time to serve out both terms. So my thinking was if we have a more extended tenure for leadership, so that there's 1 year of vice chair or 1 year of pre-chair time where you're working with the existing chair to learn about the chair role. then there's a year of serving in the chair role, and then there's a post chair role. So we could have it be 3 years, we could have it be 2 years. But my thinking was we really want to have, I think, a well-established and clear term for the chair role so that we can maintain some continuity in our historical information and set it up so that the folks who step into leadership roles or step into the chair role are folks that have had an opportunity to learn about the board by being on the board and have some of that historical knowledge. So that was some of my thinking. So my recommendation was that we increase the chair term for that reason. I also want to recognize, though, that the other side of this is that can be a lot of commitment for folks. And so I'm really wanting us to strike a balance between retaining that information, historical knowledge, new perspectives, and then also not overburdening folks who are in the chair role with a commitment that feels overwhelming. So this was my best guess. I am 100% on board with other ideas about how to balance all of those pieces so that we can have this board operate in service of what our mission is and make that decision intentionally. I think we want to set the structure for our board so that it serves our work and be thoughtful about it. So I think that's all I'll say. I'll stop talking.
So much, Lindsay. So what do you all think as council members? Would it make sense to, increase the term? So I know that we filled out that officer nomination form. And so 2 people have been nominated for chair and vice chair. I believe that, let's see here. One of them is not able to attend today. So we can absolutely kind of come back to this at the February meeting when those proposed officers are here as well, to take that, first of all, the formal election of officers, but also kind of get a little bit of feedback from them as well, since they're going to be serving in that capacity. But as council members right now, what do you all think about that?
I had one question, and I don't know, Lindsay, if you had said this when you were going through like the timeframes and years, and if I missed it, I apologize. I can't remember when folks enter the board, what the that tenure is.
The initial terms are 3 years. So each council member can serve a term of 3 years, and you can serve up to 2 terms.
But that hasn't historically been how it is. Historically, there hasn't been a limit on terms.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's partly contributed to the historical knowledge that lives on this board. Mm-hmm. So yes, the terms have been 3 years, but there hasn't been a limit to the number of terms that folks could serve. And I do think that has served to benefit this council. And again, I think the idea is to balance that with enough turnover that this still feels like a viable, vibrant board, mm-hmm. that it's got new perspectives, there's new ideas also.
I'll chime in to add, as someone without a whole lot of historical knowledge about CYMHTA, that it does feel like a valuable structure to have to make sure that we're preserving that in an effective way, and also in a way that makes it easier for it to make sense for those folks to be in more of a leadership position when interested.
Thanks, Brett. So Brett Snyder, I know that you had been nominated through the officer nomination form to be vice chair. Do you have any comments, questions, or concerns about the possible tenure arrangement of officers?
I don't, I mean, concern might be too strong of a word. I think it's more maybe a comment to ensure that as we are shoring up for whoever is in those positions, shoring up what it looks like, that we are considering achieving the necessary balance of like capacity of folks to be able to complete the responsibilities. And so looking at what is proposed for the officers in terms of amount of time that would be needed outside of the advisory board meeting that we're in right now, in terms of those preparatory meetings for other things, in terms of not just meetings, but time spent, you know, preparing for things, and just thinking about what is that kind of anticipated to look like. And if we're thinking about a longer kind of like a 4-year chunk of involvement in that, if that's something that would be sustainable long-term for people. So not so much a concern, but just kind of intentionally trying to make sure that things are planned in a way that feels sustainable and within the capacity of folks who
Right.
are likely engaged in, you know, a lot of things in addition to this
Absolutely.
board.
Absolutely.
Could I chime in? Because I'm thinking, I mean, Brett, to answer that question, I think that's really what our purview is as a board, is to determine what we want that to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like what are the things that we, and it is related to our mission. I think we have to be realistic about what our mission is as a board. And we've kind of talked about, do we want to make one recommendation a year for any potential legislation or rule change, et cetera? So if we work backwards from what are the things that we expect ourselves to accomplish in a year, that if we're thoughtful about that, and we have in mind what you've just said about this responsibility, then I think we use that to decide on tenure lengths. I'm always mission focused. Like, the mission has to dictate decisions about structure for any organization. And so I think that's what we do, is we work backwards from, this is the one thing that we want to make sure we do. And we also want to create the opportunity for ad hoc decisions on other things that come up for CYMHTA that are important. And if we have these two things that we have in mind, then what would be reasonable to ask of an executive team as it relates to that? And then we can tailor it back if we need to. But I think it's really up to us. It's not, it's up to us as an entity, as a board.
Yeah, that makes sense, Lindsay.
I'm thinking about it just like in a large scope right now on like kind of what we have planned for the next year. I would imagine maybe like an extra 12 to 15 hours per year. So what we were thinking with the establishment of the executive subcommittee, and that will be meeting for like an hour the month before the council meeting to plan out the agenda for the upcoming council meeting. So officers will be required to participate in that. Again, we understand, like, if you have to miss a meeting, you're sick or something like that, totally fine. That's why we have both the chair and vice chair. So hopefully one officer will at least be able to participate in that. So, you know, that's, I guess we meet 4 times a year, so that's 4 hours right there. When we bring on new people, we're looking to use officers as, you know, kind of that new person point of contact to welcome new members, send them that orientation package that's going to have like the training slide decks, letters of commitment, and things of that nature. So that might take a couple more minutes. Meeting with you all individually throughout the year just to make sure that there's no additional support that you're needing, that you're still feeling comfortable in those roles. I normally do that with other officers from other councils. We'll normally meet, maybe 30 minutes once a month just for a quick check-in, just seeing how everything's going and if there's any additional support that we can provide you. So it's not going to be a terribly large lift by any stretch of the means. It's going to be more communication between officers, myself and Lindsay. Mostly, just lots of emails and some infrequent check-ins and things like that. So it's definitely not going to be like a second job, and we're not going to be asking you to quit your day job by any stretch of the means, but it will be a little bit more of a lift than just, sitting as a single member of the council, solely participating in these council meetings. So just something to think about, and making sure that you all have that capacity. Again, I wouldn't imagine more than like 12 hours a year for the extra work to be done. But again, we can kind of talk through this with the council as a whole at that February meeting and discuss, what seems right for now. And again, these bylaws, they're not like set in stone. Like if we vote on them, it's not like we can never amend them or change them. We'll just continue to check in with the council as a whole every couple of months and say, do we still feel as though this is serving its purpose? Do we need to change anything? And so if at one point, we think that the tenures are too long, we can go back and change. If we think they're too short, we can go back and change. We can also write in, that members must serve a minimum of a year on the council before they're even, available to become nominated to become an officer. So that way they have a little bit more working knowledge than, somebody just jumping in on the first meeting and being elected an officer. So we can continue to kind of think through this and brainstorm this as a group. But just kind of wanted to get that on your radar today to start thinking about, and especially, like you were saying, Brett, like the capacity of officers, because we definitely don't want to overwhelm you all by any stretch of the means. That's not the goal with this. But as Lindsay was saying, really having some like strong leaders in place that know some of more of the historical knowledge about the council so that they can be the most effective leaders for this council.
Yeah, I appreciate the examples of what the detail of time spent might look like, and of course, everything's an estimate. But it's not sounding, just for me personally, is not sounding, really overwhelming. And I do think the idea, Lindsay, that you were talking about in terms of having some really solid goals would make that amount of time that the executive leadership is spending, even if that's only 12 or 15 hours a year, would make it really more effective in terms of having really like some solid goal driven pieces to it, which I think feels really helpful to me when I'm thinking about this board as a whole and being able to feel like we're able to fulfill the mission and vision that we had just talked about.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, we'll go ahead and put a pin on this for now. But again, start just kind of thinking and brainstorming. And if you have any ideas or comments or questions about this, you all, let me double check. You should have, I'm going to change this right now. You have commenting access to this. So you can go in and make a comment. So all you'll have to do is like highlight whatever you want to make a comment on and then right click and then you'll have that comment button. Or you can literally just go in and comment on my comments. So if at any point, you're thinking about this and it's an idea pops into your head, please go in here and make some comments into this working document. These are your bylaws and we want them to be, as unique to this council as you are. And so any comments, questions, or concerns that you think about this, please feel free to just jump in and go ahead and jot those down so we can keep moving forward on these and looking to hopefully get these voted in by February, but we will see. All right. So I know Ryan Templeton is going to be joining us in just a minute. Sorry, you guys. Oh, my eyeballs are so itchy today. To briefly discuss with us the governor's budget. So I'm just going to quickly run through some of the rest of the BHA announcements and updates. So again, we had talked about the creation of the executive subcommittee as well as the annual letter of recommendation subcommittee. We currently don't have enough applicants to get these up and running. So if this is something that you all are interested and you have the capacity to serve in, we're really asking for volunteers to go ahead and sign up for these. Again, the executive subcommittee, that's going to be kind of like the administrative back-end support of this council. So we'll be working to, establish the agendas for the upcoming meetings, the creation of an annual calendar so we can be really intentional about some of the speakers that we have coming to us, some of the information that we need to advise on this council. And so that's going to be a little bit more of like the administrative back-end support of the council. The letter of recommendation was something that we talked about at the August meeting as well. And again, similar to how the other councils are functioning, this would just allow us to have a formal document that we can present to the BHA with our recommendations. So I know I've been a part of these meetings just a couple of times now, but the conversations that you all have been having and the recommendations that you've been making are extremely valuable. And I think that it would be only beneficial to get that into, a written document, a formalized document that we can present to the BHA and kind of, review throughout the year. And any recommendations that we have, we can start checking in with those specific departments and agencies to see how those recommendations might be implemented, and really start connecting that feedback loop and getting our recommendations very established, like Lindsay said, possibly even, making legislation motions about that and stuff. So again, if you are interested in serving in that capacity, these links are to the application, and we're just really, really asking for volunteers here. Again, it's not going to be something that requires you to quit your day job, and we're not going to be doing like super heavy lifts with this. So we'll take, a couple other extra hours a year, but it shouldn't be anything too crazy of a lift or an ask for you all. So if you have the time, bandwidth, and it is something that you're interested, we're really asking for volunteers here. We are going to be moving our officer vote to February since we haven't reached a quorum today. And then probably same with new member vote for Lindsay. But did want to.
Caitlin, could I ask, could we do a passive vote for our new member? I know that this is something that's been on our agenda for a couple of meetings in a row, and I know we don't have a quorum to do this vote, but I'm wondering if this is something that we might be able to passively vote on, and same with our meeting cadence.
What I could do is send out like an e-vote, and have all council members just submit an e-vote, so that way we can at least get Lindsay up and running by next year, so we can have them participate in the February meeting.
That'd be great. And I think then we would just need a quorum in the vote. So maybe we'll just need to mention that so that folks know, like, you got to vote. Okay.
Yes, and I'll put that in the email as well, that all voting council members are required to vote as a part of a voting council. So hi Deborah, not a problem. I appreciate it.
Actually, does that make us at quorum if Deborah's joined?
Let's see here. We might have. We put them up there. Let me see here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. We are at exactly 50%. So we would need one extra person.
Do I count as a board member?
You do. So that is including you as a board member. So we have technically 14 board members, and we have 7 board members here. So Bridget and Nash.
Who's absent? Who's missing on the absent list? Because the absent list only shows.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have Chester, DeAngelis, we have Lindsay, we have Ella.
So we're right at.
We're right at 50%.
Okay.
Megan.
Okay.
So yeah, we're not quite there. But again, I'll just go ahead and send out Deborah.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know if this is like allowable by the rules or bylaws or whatever. I know Gina Robinson asked by email, since she wasn't going to be here, if she could delegate her vote to me if needed. I don't know if that's allowable or not, but in case it is and in case it matters, I'm happy to do that if needed. And also my camera is not working today, and I apologize for that. But thank you very much here and present.
So I actually might lean on Ryan to answer that question because I have not run into that yet.
Good morning, folks. Ryan Templeton, Policy and External Affairs Division Director with the Behavioral Health Administration. Unless it explicitly says it in the bylaws, that's usually not something that we allow, since folks are appointed as individuals onto BHA's advisory councils and boards. But I'm also not intimately familiar with what the Children and Youth Mental Health Service Standards Advisory Board bylaws say
So
about
we
it. So I'm
don't have
assuming
anything
it
in the
doesn't
bylaws
include it.
about, yeah, about allowing other members to vote on behalf. But like I said, we can just go ahead and send out that e-vote. So all council members will have access to it. I will ask them to submit their vote by December 1st. So that way they have a couple of weeks to review the application again if they need be, and then just submit their vote. It'll be a very simple form: yes, no, abstain from voting. And then we'll get that back, and then we can go ahead and reach out to Lindsay and move forward with that. Any other questions about that? All right. And then lastly, wanted to go ahead and propose our meeting cadence for 2025, since we are already at the end of 2024. So we have proposed it to meet on, I believe it's the second Thursday of these months. So February 13th, May 8th, August 14th, and November 13th. Are there any objections to that meeting cadence? I know that at the last meeting we had talked about if you all wanted to increase meetings to bi-monthly or monthly, and you all had voted to keep this as a quarterly meeting for now. So just wanted to make sure that this meeting cadence was all right with everybody. Again, we understand if there's a couple scheduling conflicts here and there, but just didn't know if there were any huge red flags that people were like, absolutely not. So all right. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Deborah. All right. So Lindsay, before we go ahead and jump to you, since we're a little bit ahead of time, I was going to let Ryan jump in and speak to the governor's budget a little bit.
Thank you for this opportunity. Again, I'm Ryan Templeton, Policy and External Affairs, Legislative Affairs Division within the Behavioral Health Administration. So just a quick overview, the governor's budget for the upcoming fiscal year in preparation for the 2025 legislative session came out on Friday. It is an incredibly tight budget year, right? There's projections about $1 billion gap in funding versus the budget. So every state department had to come with reductions. So even though we had to offer reductions, I think we're pretty confident in what our budget proposal and some of the pieces that we were able to receive. A piece of this is that want to make sure that I reiterate here a few times, which you'll hear me do, is that no service delivery or staffing at BHA has been impacted by the overall budget reduction. So the large number is about $3.6 million from BHA's operating budget has been reduced. So that's roughly 1.2, 1.3% of BHA's budget, which may sound like a lot. I think we got off a little more than other state departments just because of the importance of behavioral health and making sure that there is ensuring that there is at least the same level of access to services. So we put forth and received 8 budget requests. So I will share the folder that is, you can have access to all 8 of these that currently on the Office of State Planning and Budget's website here. But if you want more details of each of these, and I'll go over each of these if you would like. So there's 8 of them. R1 for us is increasing access to behavioral health care. This is about a $3.2 million budget increase for us. This is about care coordination happening at a provider level, at a BASO level, or those behavioral health administrative service organizations, and making sure that we are supporting our providers, those comprehensive and essential safety net providers, to ensure that they have the infrastructure in place to be able for us to call upon them with expanded expectations through the regulatory process. So that totals out to $3.2 million, or really $3.15 million, which was a pretty big win for us for now. I mean, obviously it has a whole lot of stuff it still needs to go through to get to the spot of, hey, this is in the long bill, and moving forward this is the first part of the process for what is the budget that would potentially be approved in the April-May timeframe. Second one is R2, advancing the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Implementation Plan. This is $350,000 to do a capacity assessment and a financial analysis, really to understand the current capacity of the behavioral health system and to support access to those services and ensure that all of the funding streams that go into kids' behavioral health service delivery are being accounted for and aligned together. That is a thing that feels like, hey, if we as the BHA are responsible for the implementation plan, we have to make sure that we know what the whole system entails, which includes the capacity assessment and the financial analysis. R3 is the general fund budget reduction, with moving the general fund budget reduction for the Colorado crisis line. That's that 10-digit 844 number into the 988. As we transition to 988, the statewide and national hotline, we saw an opportunity here that there is the general fund dollars that could potentially be supported by the cash fund, the 988 cash fund. So that's the request to extend spending authority within that cash fund, and allows us to then decrease the general fund for that specific line item. Again, no service impact there. It's just an opportunity to shift where funding comes from. R4, I think, is probably a big one for this group. R4 is called Alternative Funding for Behavioral Health Services. This is a net $1.6 million reduction over 3 areas. It's a general fund reduction for the CIRCLE program. That's essentially comprehensive substance use disorder residential services. That program was created before Medicaid SUD expansion. So there are Medicaid coverage that is able to support the CIRCLE program. So our BHA general fund dollars for the CIRCLE program is being supported by Medicaid expansion. So that's half of the budget reduction, is a $800,000 reduction to the CIRCLE program. Another one, treatment and detox line item, that's a $200,000 reduction because of the influx of cash fund over the recent years to treatment and detox. So a $200,000 budget reduction there. And then the last one, which I'm guessing this group should be very plugged into, is CYMHTA, and the $600,000 reduction there. With that, the ramp up from the Children and Youth Mental Health Treatment Act over the years, since it was extended, I think it was in 2019, there was a massive increase of access to kids being served by CYMHTA. It's really kind of leveled off. So part of this is that we've reverted dollars, and the $600,000 is what thought we could be comfortable with the reduction to CYMHTA there as part of our general required reduction. I'll stop there for now for any questions you may have. Ellen.
Morning, Ryan. Thanks for that overview. It's really helpful. Just to clarify, my recollection from CYMHTA budget line item in the last year or two was that they actually needed more funding. I don't know if that's an acuity reason or other, and I just wanted to better understand, like when you say 600,000 and it's leveling off, does that mean that you expect a wait list? Does that mean service provision will look differently? Like, how will that amount that's being taken out actually impact the kids we serve. So kind of a two-part. I thought that there was actually a higher need in the last year or two, and JBC had some concerns about that. And at two, what does this actually mean on the ground?
Yep. So in fiscal year 23, we got we put in the emergency supplemental and essentially moved the funding, essentially doubled the funding for CYMHTA. In FY 24, we reverted almost $2 million of that funding. So I think that's part of the big impact. There was a big shift in the numbers of individuals served over the years through CYMHTA. And so even our projections from the 2024, we had projected that roughly 360 youth were going to be served. I think it was actually 310 that were actually served. So that led to part of the reversion. And so this is us in our attempt to try to right size what the budget and what the population number of kids served within that. I think there's a lot of things happening within there, and Ellen, I think you're very aware of this. Is what does access look like? What does our service is there? Our residential service is there, and I think that's all plays into this. I think we want to make sure that we avoid pretty massive budget reversions is part of our kind of budget reduction strategy through this process as well. My hope with that R2 and the fiscal analysis, this also comes with the, hey, what is the right sizing budget of CYMHTA as a long-term strategy, and how does that actually in this program align with all of the other services and funding provided for kids? And then we have a larger picture of what is the larger all kids have access to services type of approach, and what does that look like in the future from there, with CYMHTA playing a clear role in that. So I think there's a lot of pieces that still be addressed with the kids system moving forward as well.
That's helpful. Thanks, Ryan. I guess I would just encourage this group and your team at BHA to be really transparent if this budget request goes through and there's going to end up being wait lists or things like that, so that our clinical folks who are, serving kids and families have a better sense of what access impacts may happen as a result. I just remember the years where there were wait lists with CYMHTA, and we don't want to go back there. I totally appreciate the bigger budget picture you guys are trying to solve for. So to the extent we can be helpful in advocating for resources in the absence of some of the challenges that I think the program has faced because of insurance denials and the rationale for the program even existing. And we'd love to keep that conversation going. Let us know about the budget impacts so that we can be supporters in ensuring that it's as adequately funded as possible, so that kids are not languishing in spaces where they could be better served.
Yes, thanks, Ellen. I appreciate that. Brett.
Yeah, hi. I was just curious. I've attended a couple of the intensive behavioral health services stakeholder meetings being hosted by HICPUF, as they are working on some initiatives to expand access to services for youth with higher acuity needs through the Medicaid system. And in some of those conversations, I've heard kind of I guess I'll say kind of mention of CYMHTA just in some of those spaces as kind of a partnering program for youth who are not eligible for Medicaid, and thinking about kind of growth of system of care initiatives throughout the state and throughout different funding sources. I'm just wondering about any kind of anticipated growth that folks are looking at for CYMHTA as some of that work is gaining momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good call out, and I'd even kind of offer up an opportunity with the whole kids team and the implementation plan, and what the BHA's role and responsibility within implementation plan as part of the level of transparency to an advisory body like this, right? Like, what is BHA's full approach? So then you all have more information about advising BHA on this program and how that actually fits into what our larger kids strategy for behavioral health through the Behavioral Health Administration is as well. Brett, I think you bring up exact right points. Is like, this is a complex system that covers a whole bunch of different state agencies, and there's a whole bunch of things happening right now, whether it's HICPUF and the settlement agreement and the system of care, for high acuity kids that they're responsible for. How does that fit in, and how does CYMHTA potentially support the kids that maybe aren't Medicaid eligible but still need service delivery? I think those are all things BHA is fully responsible for. It's just part of how we are executing on that is a piece that, I mean, it resonates with me. The Ellen, yes, make sure that you're being as transparent as you absolutely can be within this process, and that is what BHA needs to be doing. So this is where Caitlin, you and I can connect together, and Lindsay as well, about what potential additional agenda items could be for this group moving forward to kind of help support that kind of robust conversations that then lead to kind of those recommendations coming from this group that kind of drive kind of even deeper recommendations and deliverables as well. So appreciate all these. I'm going to quickly go through a couple more requests here. The school mental health screening program, that's House Bill 23 1003, where it's screenings in schools. Part of that appropriation was 2 separate contracts, one for data and one for the delivery of the screening within schools. We had a contractor that was able to combine both of those into a single contract, which saved dollars. So this is a reversion of $775,000 because our contractor was able to do it at less cost. We still fully expect that the budget that remains there, it's about $2.5 million, that the expansion of the program over the years is going to be supported within that full amount of dollars minus the $775,000. The initial estimation is 11 schools are going to be implementing that school mental health screening this year. We fully expect that to expand over the years, and within that budget that we are proposing, fully expect that expansion to happen as well. One that I've been getting a whole lot of questions on is R6. It's called Right Sizing iMatter. iMatter, when it was passed in perpetuity last year as Senate Bill 1, it was made a program of $5 million. There was an annualization that kicked the program up to $11 million. So we are saying we can fully operate iMatter at the $5 million mark. We do not need the extra $6 million to run iMatter. So it looks like a $6 million budget reduction, but we've actually never seen that additional $6 million for this program. So we're saying iMatter at the $5 million mark, we can continue to operate it as is with the services that they provide, up to those 6 services for youth that allow that easy access to get into the behavioral health system. And so it's maintaining the $5 million appropriation instead of moving it up to the 11. A little bit just of a kind of a funky way of budgets, right? Where we had to specifically ask for not to receive the additional $6 million. So it looks like a budget reduction, but we've never seen those dollars. R7 is just giving us spending authority for the behavioral health entity licensing cash fund. We collect fees for entities going through the licensing process to become a behavioral health entity. BHA did not have authority to spend the dollars that we collected through those fees. So that's a request to allow us to spend what's currently in there, the $420,000 in that cash fund. And then the last one is R8. It's called High Acuity Crisis for Children and Youth. This was Senate Bill or House Bill last year, 1003. It was a Ledge Council Services fiscal note error that was caught in August between Ledge Council, BHA, and JBC. So what this is an addition of general fund dollars because of the appropriation for BHA to cover the anticipated room and board expenses. They attributed that to federal funds. We cannot use federal funds to pay room and board, and it has to be general fund dollars. So it's just a shift in where that money comes from. So R8 is really just a shift in dollars to ensure that we can execute on the 1038 requirements for BHA. So that's all 8 of them. I think I did share with the drive that includes a little bit more context to each one of those budget requests, but definitely do not be a stranger if you have additional questions for me and BHA as a whole.
Thanks, Ryan. Would it make sense for you to possibly come back in February to provide some updates about budget and impacts, or would that be too fast of a turnaround time for budget?
I'm assuming it's going to be a little quick, as usually long build time happens a little bit later in the session. So is
Maybe
there
our May meeting then?
yeah, depending on timing of that, yeah, it's going to potentially line up right with the end of session there, which we can do our best to provide.
If you
level of
can't be here in
transparency.
February, I would recommend, Ryan, just letting the group know, like even a written update on the status of the conversations, just so that everybody's aware, because is so many system parts that are moving and changing, and to the comments around the Medicaid system, I think it'd be helpful for the group to have awareness.
Yep, and yeah, I mean, this also might be a good opportunity if we can, yeah, introduce this group to additional staff at PHA as well, which I think is an opportunity for this group to be more plugged into what is happening at PHA from a leadership level as well. So, yeah, either way, Caitlin, Lindsay, I can support this group in making sure that you have as much information as we can provide.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. We appreciate you being here.
Yep, I got to jump to another one. So thank you. Like I said, do not hesitate to reach out. You can reach out definitely through Caitlin or Lindsay to me. On my team is, yeah, we can try to get whatever questions answered that you may have. So thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks, Ryan.
Go ahead.
All right. So I know that was a lot of information coming at you there, but I have linked the Google Drive that he sent in the chat to our comments in the agenda. So please definitely feel free to take a look at that and go over it in a little bit more detail at your leisure, and let me know if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, and I can work with Lindsay and Ryan to get those answered. And then, yeah, I think that I'll start talking with Ryan and Lindsay a little bit more, and we can at least have somebody from leadership come and speak a little bit more at the February meeting, just to provide an update. Even if there's no, major changes in budget, and we don't really have all that much to talk about, we can at least let you know the conversations that have been had and the current status of things as well. All right. So at this, we will pass it over to Lindsay.
All right. So at the end of our meeting last quarter, we were discussing some data that I shared with regard to private insurance. And if you all can remember, one of the things that we were a bit, I didn't quite have an answer to, was there was discrepancies in the percentages on one of the items I shared from the annual report for fiscal year 2023. So I have I've did some additional digging and have some answers for you regarding the discrepancies in the percentage. And I also mentioned that I had information about which providers were the how do I say this? The repeat offenders with regard to not funding necessary services. And so I have that information to share with you. And I also mentioned that I might at this time have current data, and I do. So I'm going to present to you also hot off the presses fiscal year 24 data on private insurance funding and the role that CYMHTA plays in addressing gaps in private insurance. So Caitlin, I think you have your sharing on your end for the agenda. Would you mind ending your sharing? And or let me see if I can just share mine. Oh, okay, I can just share mine. All right, so if you remember, this was one of the last slides that I shared with you all in the last quarter with regard to reasons that CYMHTA funding was needed when young people did in fact have private insurance. And about 83.5% of the youth in fiscal year 23 needed CYMHTA funding despite having private insurance because specific services were not covered through the private insurance. And on the left, this graphic was a breakdown of which services were most often needed that were not covered. And the 9.8 was the percentage of young people that needed CYMHTA funding because the deductible was too high, or they had they'd exhausted their benefits. And these didn't total, in part because there were circumstances where there was one child who needed a particular service that wasn't covered. And so they were included in the 1%. And then they also had another service that was covered, but that they couldn't afford the deductible. So there were some youth that are in each percentage. So they're calculated as separate percentages. The remaining, this comes out to like 93.3%-ish. The remainder of the young people who, to reach the 100%, the reason CYMHTA services were needed were really related to network insufficiencies when I went back and looked at it. So for instance, it's covered service, but they were denied by the residential providers that were in network for their private insurance. So that happened a handful of times. So there was an insurance denial for services. There's also that a particular young person had a provider that was that they wanted services through, and they weren't covered by the insurance, and it was a provider issue. So the service itself was covered, but there was not, the person that they wanted to work with or had been working with wasn't covered any longer through their insurance. And so CYMHTA would cover that for continuity of care. But that's, this is state fiscal year 23 data. I have actually been able to go dig in even a little bit more on the 2024 data. So let me show you, this is a breakdown of the carriers. So by carriers, who of all of the services that were requested and denied, who was most often listed as the insurance provider. And so the providers that were most often not funding were Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, Kaiser, Cigna, and United Healthcare. This is the level of granularity for this data was the request at the request. So this is of the percentages of requests, which insurance company was most often mentioned as not covering a service. But I also looked at, of all of the services that were not covered, which insurance didn't cover those, which providers didn't cover that particular service. And so you can kind of look at it this way as well and see United Healthcare, they really didn't cover any of the services that were covered through CYMHTA. Some of these other providers, it was a one-off. So they didn't cover in-home family therapy, most often in-home family therapy and respite services, which is reflected in the graphic that you saw before. Those are most often not covered by the providers, but there are providers that won't cover a particular service, but then they will cover a majority of the other services that weren't covered by other providers. So this is another way to look at these. And again, this right here is for fiscal year 2023. So this is 23, fiscal year 23. So fiscal year 24, this data I got in September and dug in to look at what percentage of young people needed CYMHTA services because their needed service wasn't covered. And about 79% of the people in CYMHTA needed CYMHTA for that reason. I also then looked at what are the other reasons that a young person might need CYMHTA. And I did a little bit more of a granular analysis for this fiscal year than I did in the previous one. And I found that for 5%, it was because the deductibles and the co-pays were unaffordable. For 2%, it was because their insurance benefits had been exhausted. So I separated out those two categories for this fiscal year. 6%, it was because of network insufficiencies. 6% of young people said they didn't have private insurance. So I included people who didn't have private insurance in this particular analysis so we could look at if that was a part of it. And then 2% because residential providers had denied admission. So it was deemed to not be medically necessary. And so they didn't move forward with private insurance, but CYMHTA actually determined that it was. And so we funded it. So let me pause and ask if there's any questions so far before I move. My next slide shows a breakdown of the particular types of services for fiscal year 24 that were not covered. Okay, I'll move on, and let me know if something comes up here. So there were a lot more services that were not covered as a one-off. 40% of the services that were needed that weren't covered through private insurance, but were covered by us at CYMHTA. It was 40% in-home family therapy, 7% respite, 3% ABA without a diagnosis. We had 6% of our youth that needed autonomic homeostasis activation, or AHA. That's not covered through private insurance. 6% needed equine-assisted, animal-assisted therapy, and that also was not covered through private insurance. Neurofeedback, mentorship was another big one. We did have some youth that needed residential that wasn't covered through their private insurance. We had a category that I called alternative therapies, and so this included music, art therapy. And then I lumped any service that was mentioned once, so it was less than 1%, into an other service with less than 1%. So that was about 6% of the survey services were only mentioned about once as not being covered. So this is the 79% from the previous slide. This 79%, this is a breakdown of what those services were that were not covered. And I also looked at, similar to fiscal year 2023, what did it look like for this year in terms of which providers were not funding the services that were needed. And the same United Healthcare, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Cigna, those three were listed. Kaiser was also listed, and CHP Plus was listed here as well. And then I again compared by type of benefit. Something that's important to mention is, actually, I think I forgot to mention this here. This slice of green here, the 6%, that meant that the insurance provider had no behavioral health coverage at all. At all. That was listed, 6% of CYMHTA youth. And when you look here, it was predominantly Christian Health Share Ministries. It was Emergency Medicaid, IHP, Medishare, and Reverence 4. These are the providers that had no mental health coverage for their young people at all. And then again, in-home family therapy was not covered by a majority of the providers. And yes, I think I'll stop there. So So then I also, Deborah, let me say my next slide is every year. I took all of that data and put it together into one graphic to look at what are the services that are not covered. And that's what this shows here. So this is all of the data combined between 2020 and 2024. So I'll stop. Deborah, did you want to ask a question? This is my last slide. Oh, no,
No,
wait.
that's great. And I didn't mean for you to have to stop. I was just curious. I was processing a few slides back. What
Okay.
falls under the category of, I can't remember, system inadequacy or system insufficiency? I guess in the moment I was thinking that was, yeah, network insufficiency. What
Network
falls under that? Because I was
insufficiency.
thinking that was probably these things that aren't covered, but now I'm thinking those might be two different categories.
They are. They're related to not having providers. So some of this is actually related to not having providers that are accessible. Some of it is about wait list. Some of it is about let me remember. There wasn't a provider who could provide a particular service given the need, the level of need. And so it was determined to be insufficient.
I can give a couple examples of like anecdotal examples if helpful.
That'd be great, Brett. Yeah, because it was all your data that I was pulling from.
So for example, we might speak to an insurance company and they don't actually have an exclusion for in-home therapy. They say, yeah, we cover family therapy and yeah, we have place of service can be in-home. And we say, okay, well, what in-network providers do you have that can provide that service then? And they'll send a list of, oh my gosh, lots of providers, and our care coordinator will diligently call through all those providers. And it turns out none of them actually provide in-home family therapy, right? So somewhere in their credentialing and enrollment with the insurance company, you know, some box has been checked saying we provide this or we provide this location or something, but there's not actually any in-network provider that delivers that service, even though the insurance company is saying it's not. It is technically a covered benefit or it's not an exclusion. So that might be an example. Another one might be, Lindsay, you had mentioned when there's like no provider that is appropriate for the child or will take the child. So we've had like a situation in the past where a client was unable to access psychiatry services because all of the psychiatrists that were in network with the insurance were denying to see the client because of their acuity level. They didn't feel that it was appropriate within their scope to treat them. And so even though it was a covered benefit, there were people available, they weren't able to access the service through insurance.
That helps a lot, Brett. Thank you.
Any other questions about this data?
I do have a question. Does this also include rural areas?
It does. This is statewide.
Okay.
Yep. I have not yet, I have it in mind to actually look at some of this by region, by county, in part because this data, some of my reason for getting all of this data analyzed as quickly as I did was to share with you all, you fine folks. And I'm also hoping to take some of this information into meetings with the deputy commissioner so that we can start talking about how to interface with the Department of Insurance. She has, our commissioner, Commissioner Smith has it in mind to start bringing conversations to our sister agencies, in particular, the Department of Insurance. And so I'm in the process of writing a one-pager to provide a rationale for why we need to start asking more of the Department of Insurance, asking more from providers. And this data, I'm going to be integrating some of it into my argument for why we need to do that. And so some of that is about looking at how do we better serve rural communities and set up the insurance, Medicaid, and even our system to facilitate the delivery of services in rural communities to a greater extent. So, and just this is anecdotal, but in talking with one of our other ASOs who oversees a lot of rural communities, what she shared with me is that there will be a circumstance where an insurance provider will say that they provide in-home family therapy, and they'll have a code even for the in-home therapy, and the intensive aspect, it requires a greater amount of time than what's afforded in that code. And so what it will do is it will inhibit the delivery of in-home family therapy in rural communities because the travel requirement's not funded. So the travel isn't funded. Also, in some rural communities, especially like ski towns, we don't fund it well enough for providers to live in the community that they're serving. And so these are some of the puzzle pieces that we're trying to look at. How do these fit together? So I will be doing a regional analysis of some of this data in the hopes that we can look at what levers do we need to pull with the Department of Insurance in order to improve not just our funding of behavioral health, but actually system-wide funding for behavioral health, so that we can start driving providers into rural communities so that they can be well paid and happy and do that work, and then really improve the circumstance for everyone in those communities.
Thank you. I was just curious, but yeah, thank you for that explanation. That makes so much sense. And thank you for your work.
Yeah. It's exciting for me. It's very exciting for me as a clinician. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. The opportunity to actually increase the payment for work that I see as so critical and so valuable, that's just historically been really difficult to get funded, it's what I am happy to be doing with my career, because I have trained clinicians that have struggled with the fact that as a family therapist, the more people I have in my room, the less I get paid when I work through insurance because of the coding. So I'm like, those things I feel very passionately about trying to address.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I just want to be mindful of time. I know that we are at 6 minutes till. Do you think that rural review might be something that we could speak a little bit more about in February? Is that enough time for that analysis?
I can share some of what I pull together for the commissioner. And I'm hoping that I will have had that rural analysis done, because I will be doing some of that, but let's maybe just leave it generic that I'll do a follow-up on what I've sent to the commissioner. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
All right, just made a little note about it in there. So at this time, we just kind of want to open it up to any public comments. So any of our public participants, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, if you'd want to come off mute. Pam, I see your chat to Lindsay specifically. So Lindsay, if you'd like to reach out.
Yeah, I will. Pam, I'll put my email in the chat there so we can connect.
All right. So Enya had a question specifically about where that they can find more information regarding how clients and families are referred to CYMHTA funding, and if there's only one referral source.
I can answer that. What was the last question that you said, Caitlin? I can share with you how to access CYMHTA. What was the last part of that?
Yeah, it's Inya's question in the chat. It says, where can I find more information regarding how clients and families are referred to CYMHTA funding? Is there one referral source for potential clients?
There is, yes. So let me put a link in the chat. This is the Children and Youth Mental Health Treatment Act website. In this website, there's a drop-down box. I can actually, let me share this with you so you can see what I'm looking at as I talk instead of me talking at you. Here, there's a drop-down box for parents and guardians. CYMHTA has to be a voluntary program, which means that the parents and guardians have to be the person to initiate a clinical assessment. So the parents and guardians, they can come here. We have a beautiful fact sheet that has information about the program, eligibility, how to reach out. We have it in Spanish, finally, yay. And then more importantly, here is this liaison contact list. This is the list where folks will go to figure out who to call. And it's based on county. So whatever county a young person lives in, they'll reach out to the contact here. This is called they are called the CYMHTA liaisons. And you can reach out by phone or email. And as soon as the family reaches out, it initiates a process where they'll be in contact with clinical care coordinator. They receive clinical assessment services to determine if they meet the criteria for receiving CYMHTA services. And then assuming that they do, then they move forward in the program with intensive clinical care coordination and support from the agency that oversees their region. So this is the way to find CYMHTA here.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So I know that we are basically at time right now. So for the board planning agenda items for February, right now we have BHA budget follow-up conversations with the BHA policy and team, as well as the rural care access review with Lindsay, specifically regarding the status of that one-page analysis with Commissioner Smith. Melissa, I see your chat in I see your question in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and put that into our notes for us to get back with you. If you could please just drop your email into the chat, that would be really helpful. All right, everybody. Anybody else for the good of the group right now? All right. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much again for participating on this very snowy Thursday. We really appreciate you all being here. Just keep an eye out on your email. We'll be sending up a follow-up email with some action items, specifically that e-vote for our new member appointment so we can get her appointed and up to speed for our February meeting. Additionally, I'll be sending out that Zoom link for your standing calendar invites. So you should have that throughout the entire year of 2025. So just keep an eye out on your emails. And of course, if you need anything in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Lindsay. We are always here to support you and just appreciate everything that you do for us and for this council. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. You
Thank
as well.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.